Namaste. The fire of suffering becomes the light of consciousness. Suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. So, suffering is necessary until you come to the state of awareness, until you expand your consciousness. Then, suffering is not required. And then, even though you suffer, you will never feel that you are suffering, because suffering is always mental. Retrograde Saturn brings certain suffering at some stage of life. This suffering can be in the form of being jobless or being a failure in business. And then life seems to be stuck. But this time, when you are compelled to sit back, this time you can put to good use. Basically, retrograde Saturn is a sign wherein God wants you to sit back, pause, and introspect and focus on cleansing your karma. So, when Saturn is retrograde, the native in a way is fortunate because he can focus on cleansing his past karma. People are always in rush, right? They are continuously doing certain actions. So they actually never get time to sit back and focus on cleansing their karma because they are constantly running. But when Saturn is retrograde, then the person gets time to introspect, to turn inwards, and basically to understand the reality of this human life. And that is why many great spiritual masters have retrograde Saturn. One of them is Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I have talked about it in this podcast as well. So, retrograde Saturn is indeed a sign that if other planetary aspects are positive, then the person turns out to be highly intelligent person. What is intelligence? Observation without evaluation is the highest form of intelligence. And the interesting part is that this has been said by Jiddu Krishnamurti himself, who has retrograde Saturn. And so this also brings the quality of observing. Good observation happens when you have retrograde Saturn. So there are many such beautiful outcomes of this retrograde Saturn. And of course, there are certain negative shades also to it. And I have discussed both in this podcast. So let's begin. Life is a miracle in slow motion. Retrograde Saturn is a sign that your life too is a miracle in slow motion. When you watch a certain movie scene in slow motion, you tend to observe each action very closely. And this observation brings certain clarity to you. You understand the purpose, the reason, and the overall background story of the scene because you watched it in slow motion. So basically, slow motion helps you to observe and thereby learn many new things that otherwise you would have not known. So retrograde Saturn does bring certain wisdom to the native, since the mode of his or her life is in slow motion. So they get ample amount of time to self-observe. And let me tell you, self-observation is the first step of inner unfolding. The highest spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. Observation without evaluation is the highest form of intelligence, says Jiddu Krishnamurti. In a chart of an evolved soul, retrograde Saturn brings the highest form of intelligence because when Saturn is in a retrograde state, the person tends to possess a good sense of self-observation. Self-observation helps us to refocus within, to balance ourselves, and to be in the present moment. I am personally delighted to see this placement of retrograde Saturn in a quality horoscope, since the native is a ripe fruit. Of course, I am talking of natives having a certain higher level of awareness. Such natives with retrograde Saturn are indeed yogis in past birth cycles, or they have the potential to reach the state of yogi in this birth cycle. Incidentally, Jiddu Krishnamurti had a retrograde Saturn placed in the Libra sign. Such a retrograde Saturn not only brings the power of observation but also makes the person more rational in his thoughts. In fact, retrograde Saturn is the most rational person you would ever meet. In the Indian context, such a person is Buddhijivi, Buddhiman, meaning highly intelligent. However, such a retrograde Saturn should have good support from other benefic planets such as Jupiter, Sun, Moon, and Mercury in the birth chart. Understand the fact that you can truly understand the true essence of life when you pause, when you sit back and observe all that is happening in and around your life. Retrograde Saturn at some stage of life brings this opportunity wherein the native is compelled to slow down and pause just so that he can take stock of the reality of his life and thereby evolve as a much matured person. However, if Jupiter is afflicted or weak, then the whole purpose of retrograde Saturn goes down the drain, and the native miss this rare opportunity to self-observe and make a good use of the free time he gets due to a certain professional setback in life. It is likely that retrograde Saturn may compel you to spend certain days of your life in a jobless state Or if you are a businessman, then you may experience a certain downfall, a very low phase in your life where you have absolutely nothing to do, but all you can do is just to stay silent and spend some quality time with yourself. However, this pause state of life is actually a golden opportunity for you to introspect and cleanse your karma by bringing more and more awareness to your being. Karma cleansing is the primary motto of retrograde Saturn. Evolved souls having retrograde Saturn are primarily focused on correcting the course of their life. In the early stages of their life, they may commit certain mistakes. However, in the later stage of life, they become more and more aware of themselves and they realize the significance of karmic law, and that leads them to the most important question of life: how to cleanse my karma? And the answer is found in the divine words of the Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi. Sri Sarada Devi says, "The result of karma is inevitable, but by repeating the name of God, you can lessen its intensity. If you were destined to have a wound as wide as a plowshare, you will get a pinprick at least." The effect of karma can be counteracted to a great extent by japa and austerities. Chanting God's holy name lessens the intensity of karmic effects. The solution is available. The greatest solution or remedy is to focus on daily chanting, and when you chant, you should chant with deep love and devotion. But people don't want the real solution. They want quick solutions. They just want to pay thousands of rupees or dollars to some black magician and get what they want. But such kinds of solution never work. But who wants to listen? Saturn retrograde native with certain positive planetary placement understands the fact that karma cleansing is possible only through one's self-effort and not by paying money to others. Saturn retrograde native is a very rational person by nature and generally never falls for fake babas and fake gurus. In fact, they strongly believe that there is no teacher and there is no student. They simply rejoice in sharing the many treasures of wisdom with those who have a certain depth of understanding. Remember, truths can be given only to those who have a certain depth of understanding. And understanding is not taught in any universities or colleges. Understanding comes only when you start focusing on raising the level of your awareness by turning inwards. Saturn is a slow-moving planet, but whatever Saturn bestows upon you lasts for a longer time than otherwise. In fact, whatever Saturn gifts you is a kind of permanent in nature. The planet of wisdom is Saturn. Wisdom comes from self-experience, my fellows. It does not come by reading books. However, before wisdom dawns upon you, you first need to become a good disciple. A disciple is judged based on his thirst for learning. This thirst for learning is signified by Lord Jupiter. It is through self-learning, that is by the blessings of Lord Jupiter, that one day you attain wisdom, which is signified by Lord Saturn's blessings. And therefore, Jupiter and Saturn should be in good condition in your birth chart. Retrograde Saturn pulls you in a pause state, owing to which if you are an evolved soul or an evolving soul, then you can make good use of this pause state and focus on turning inwards and thereby attain self-growth and wisdom. However, retrograde Saturn may lead you to certain differences with your father. Saturn is not on good terms with father, and when Saturn is retrograde, happiness from the father is absent, or relations with the father is restrained, or the father dies early. Some shortcoming related to the father is evident with retrograde Saturn. Even though retrograde Saturn in a good positive birth chart is a sign of wisdom, still it is necessary to remember that wisdom comes only when you go through the fire of suffering. The fire of suffering becomes the light of consciousness, and then it is this light of consciousness that eventually lead you to the divinity that showers blessings through which you attain wisdom. So the source of wisdom is consciousness, and the Guru, the Divine Master, is the ocean of consciousness. The Guru or the Master always is found in the supreme state of consciousness, God consciousness. Saturn plays a vital role when it comes to suffering, and it is important to note that suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. Now it is a fact that millions and millions of people around this world suffer. However, not all are able to attain the state of consciousness. This is because every soul exists at different levels, and these levels are not based on bank balance but your karmic balance, and to what purpose you use your good karmic balance. For example, you may have 100 points for your good karmic balance in your life account. Now, how you use this balance is what decides your future course of destiny. Some use it to earn tons and tons of money and physical pleasures, while some use it to attain self-growth. Some become millionaires and billionaires, while some become Buddha. So it all depends. This is a very deep subject. Though for now, all you need to understand is that it is your desire that drives your destiny, that shapes your destiny. Some people desire to use their good karmic balance to attain all kinds of pleasures of this human world, while some people desire to attain the beyond, the unseen, the godly experience. And between these two extremes is the majority of population, which keeps swinging on both ends, material and spiritual. Retrograde Saturn is a beautiful placement that actually provides a good opportunity to raise the level of your awareness and thereby change the quality of your desire. Now, this desire is your Rahu. And so Saturn plays a very significant role in shaping the state of Rahu in this life as well as life thereafter. Retrograde Saturn is a blessing in disguise. It is a sign that in past births the native has been indulging in so many pleasure-seeking activities that in this birth Lord Saturn wants the native to sit back and take stock of his karma. As mentioned earlier, a retrograde position is simply a sign that the native has been provided with a second chance to cleanse his karma so that in the next birth he can again rise to a high position, but this time with more awareness. Young men and women with retrograde Saturn generally commit many mistakes during their college days as well as in their mid-20s and 30s. However, once they cross the age of 42, then they truly start changing for good. In many cases, it is observed that their whole life takes a 360-degree turn, leading them to many wonderful spiritual experiences in the later stage of their life. It is important to note that retrograde Saturn not necessarily shortens the lifespan of the native. However, if Jupiter is afflicted by Rahu or Ketu, and if the 8th house and 3rd house lord is also in bad state, then the native may not have a long span of life. He or she may die in mid 50s or mid 60s. Retrograde Saturn does extremely well in the 3rd, 6th, 12th, and 8th house. When a slow moving planet Saturn goes in slow motion state in these houses, then the native gets sufficient time to retrospect on the matters of these 4 houses and thereby evolve as a much matured person in life. Since 3rd, 6th, 8th, and 12th are the most dynamic and challenging houses, retrograde Saturn does extremely well in these houses. And then there is one very special placement of retrograde Saturn, and that is retrograde Saturn in Libra sign. In Libra, Saturn is exalted, and retrograde motion brings Saturn in slow motion. An exalted Saturn in a retrograde state makes one a great observer. Always remember, it is only through observation that you can understand the whole essence of a certain subject. Evolved souls never observe through the mind. The mind is a monkey. Instead, they observe through the self. And the more you have realized yourself, the more you have come closer to yourself, the more your observation is going to be correct. You see, that is how the observation of enlightened masters is. And one of them is the Divine Master, Ramakrishna Paramahans. Ramakrishna Paramahans was the guru of Swami Vivekananda, and Ramakrishna Paramahans had a Libra retrograde Saturn in his birth chart. His retrograde Saturn in Libra was placed in the 9th house, and what a great spiritual master he was. His retrograde Saturn in Libra sign and exalted Venus in Pisces provided the necessary ground for his overall spiritual progress and his attainment of the self. Always remember, whenever the Lord of the sign in which a planet is placed is powerful, then the planet always provides positive results. In the case of Ramakrishna Paramahans, Saturn was in Libra and Venus was exalted in Pisces. Paramahans means the greatest swan, who has become capable of discriminating between darkness and light, between right and wrong. Paramahans means madness beyond the mind. What is madness? There are 2 possibilities. Madness literally means going out of the mind, hence the 2 possibilities. You can go out of the mind either below the mind or above the mind. Ordinarily, people go below the mind because it needs no effort. You don't have to do anything. Any shock can shatter the stability of your mind. Somebody you loved died. Your business has gone bankrupt. The shock is so much that you cannot keep your normality. You fall below the mind. Your behavior becomes irrational, but you go beyond the misery. If you had remained in the normal mind, the shock would have created immense misery. It is a natural way to avoid the shock. It simply pulls you down. Now you don't know what has happened. Your business has gone bankrupt. Your wife or your husband has died, or your child has died. It doesn't matter. In fact, you don't even remember. You have entered into a new phase. You have become a new person. But it is going to be irrational, abnormal, unpredictable. This is ordinarily called madness, insanity all over the world. Only in the East have we found that there is another kind of madness that comes from deep meditation, going beyond the mind and not below the mind. Both are outside the mind, hence there is some similarity. So sometimes you will find that the madman once in a while behaves almost as a wise man. He has insights. He has no control over them. They are just flashes. But sometimes he can see things which you cannot see. In the East, where mind has been the sole center of all research down the centuries, we have discovered that you can go above the mind. Sufism accepts that state and calls it the state of a mast, a divine madman. He is mad, but he is superhumanly mad. His behavior is irrational as far as our logic is concerned. But perhaps there is a higher logic according to which his behavior is not irrational. In India, such a man is called Paramahans. When Ramakrishna Paramhans was dying, he had a cancer of the throat, and it became impossible for him to eat anything or drink anything. And his followers were telling him again and again, "You just close your eyes and tell the existence, it will listen to you." He would close his eyes but would forget all about it. After a while, when he would open his eyes, the disciples were waiting. They would say, "What happened?" He said, "Nothing, because when I closed my eyes, everything becomes silent." "What are you expecting to happen?" They said, "We had asked you to ask existence." Finally, they forced his wife, Sharda. "Perhaps only you can persuade him." Unwillingly, reluctantly, she asked him. With tears in her eyes, she said, "I don't want to tell you to do anything, because that is interfering, and my whole life I have never said a single word to interfere. You are far above, my hands cannot reach. But because these people are so deeply in anguish, I have agreed to say to you, just once, close your eyes and ask existence, what are you doing to me? Remove this cancer from my throat." Ramakrishna Paramhansa said, "Because you have never asked anything. Every wife is asking everything, any day, every day. For your whole life you have never asked anything, and this is maybe my last day or last days. I will fulfill it." He closed his eyes, and then after a while he opened his eyes and said, "Sharda, I asked, and I heard a voice saying to me, 'Ramakrishna, can't you drink with other people's throats? Can't you eat with other people's throats? Do you necessarily need your own throat? Are you still attached to your own body?' And I said, 'No, I had to say the truth.' So the voice said, 'From now onwards, you eat with everybody's throat. You drink with everybody's throat.'" This is the stage of cosmic consciousness. This man may look mad, may behave in some ways which do not fit with our mind, and psychology has to find a place for this man, separate from the madman that we know. Retrograde Saturn is therefore a very special placement. However, as I always say, a good seed is spoiled if the soil and the environment is not suitable to its growth. And so, along with retrograde Saturn, you need to have a positive placement of other planets in your chart. Only then this retrograde Saturn and the Mahadesha of retrograde Saturn will bring a new perspective to your life. Life is all about perspective. When perspective towards your life changes, everything changes for good. Once, when I was with a great spiritual master, I remember his divine words. He had said, "When I met my Guru, my whole perspective towards life changed." My fellows, never underestimate the power of perspective. It can change your life for good. Yesterday, a man was saying, "Love is blind." He must be a very ignorant person, because he doesn't know what love is. It is only love that has eyes. Other than love, everything is blind. A man of awareness understands the true essence of love. He can sacrifice life for love. It is worth it. Always remember, only that man is fortunate who goes through suffering, and through the phase of suffering, he learns and understands the true essence of this human life. Suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. Every saint has been through a hell of a suffering, because it is only when the iron goes through the fire that it comes out shining, glowing like a star. To a man who is taking efforts towards his self-growth, retrograde Saturn is a blessing in disguise. However, a man who is merely spending his precious life in criticizing others and abusing others and hurting others will simply waste this golden opportunity, and in the next birth will fall to a much lower level of awareness. It all depends on what you are. Whatever you are from within is what you will get on the outside. To gain momentum with retrograde Saturn, first you have to work on your Rahu. Rahu is desire. Unless and until you raise the quality of your desires, the retrograde Saturn cannot help you. So start focusing on raising the quality of your desires. How to? The answer is simple. By focusing within, by turning inwards, and by balancing your life in a way that you execute your worldly responsibilities, but you remain detached. It is only through the state of detachment that you can truly attain the height of consciousness. It is a difficult journey. It is a long journey. But remember, every long journey starts with a small step. Step ahead and let the journey within continue. Jai Sri Ganesha, Jai Guru. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha.